Yeah,
Hello, everyone. Super excited to be here. A little nervous. This is my first time doing a video like this. I'm super excited that John's able to join. Just a little intro. I'm James Clancy. I'm head of developer relations at Locify, and I'm joined by Jon Lipsky, and I'll let him introduce himself.
yeah. So I'm Jon Lipsky. I'm a former colleague of Clancy's at Xamarin and Microsoft. Known him for a very long time at this
Very
point,
long time. Yeah.
in a very long time. So yeah, I'm excited to be here as well, and excited to be the guinea pig.
Yeah, we'll make this work. We'll make this work. So right now, I know, like you said, we've been to Microsoft together. You went off to GitHub, and now you're off doing your own thing. Do you wanna? You're running your own company right now. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, I guess I've been running my own company on the side for what are we for 15 years now. So what was it? 15 years ago, I was at IBM running an advanced analytics and optimization, mathematical optimization consulting practice. And Steve Jobs went up on the stage, introduced the iPad, and I said, "What am I doing this? That's what I want to do." So quit my job at IBM and figured out, okay, what can I go and build as an app? And so started a company and built TouchDraw, which was a vector 2D drawing app for iOS, then for Mac, then for Android, and now also Windows, but no longer Android. Um, and so I've always had this business on the side, even though I was at Xamarin, at Microsoft, and at GitHub. And about a year ago, decided to leave GitHub, take some time off, and so spent some time with my family and also get to work on my side projects a little bit or kind of scratch some of those itches that I've had for a while. So that's what I've been doing to keep myself busy, along with a little bit of consulting here and there to pay the bills.
Oh, I understand. I'm jealous. Side projects. I can't wait to the day to where that's all I get to work on is the side projects. One day they'll all become the real project. So I'm excited. I'm excited to dig in a little bit of some of the stuff you've been working on. So let's start out a little bit and let's talk a little bit about like career development, right? Because you started out, like you said, you left IBM, you went off and you built your own company, and then you ended up joining us at Xamarin. And that was pretty fun. I was actually surprised we were able to convince you to join us there. Do you want to talk a little about your career path and kind of how it worked out? Did you go to school? I actually don't know that question, which is funny.
Yes, I went to college for computer engineering, but no, I do not have a degree. I did not finish. I liked actually coding much more than I liked going to school. So um, I decided to go get a job as opposed to actually finishing college. That's not necessarily held me back. But I'm one of those people that I knew when I was 5 or 6 years old exactly what I wanted to be when I grew up. My dad bought an Apple II, and I was coding at 6 or 7 years old in BASIC, and then went from BASIC to 6502 assembly. Then we got an Apple II GS, and I taught myself Pascal and C, and then we moved to a Mac where I learned to do 68,000 assembly, did C and Pascal development on the Mac. So I was a developer even before I went to college. In many ways, it was kind of moving backwards when I started taking programming classes in college because I had to go from doing assembly and C stuff to doing Pascal, which was the intro to coding classes that were given when I went to school. So I was already knew I wanted to be a developer. But the thing about my career is I think I've done about every job that you could possibly do within the tech industry. So I was a developer, I've been a consultant, started a company, had it fail, ran technical sales, ran a consulting team. I even for 6 months tried my hands at being a sales guy, completely removed from LinkedIn. It's no, there's no existence anywhere that you can finally see. But I did try to be a sales guy. So I think I've tried a little bit of everything, and in my roles at Microsoft and GitHub, they were kind of hybrid roles where I did a bit of program management, a bit of product management, and a bit of engineering management. So I've kind of been in flux throughout my whole career doing a little bit of everything.
No, that's exciting. Yeah, that's interesting. I knew you'd been coding forever, but I didn't realize, yeah, you went to school and dropped out on that. I went for like a semester or two, so I'm right there with you. Totally get that thing. All right. So we've got a little bit about the intro. We've done that. Let's start talking a little bit about some of the projects you're working on, because that's where we get to the exciting stuff. So I know you've been working on some interesting things. I got a preview ahead of time and saw some of the fun things. Do you want to jump in and talk a little bit about some of the stuff you've been working on?
Yeah, well, I think maybe for much of our audience, they probably know that you worked on a library called Comet when you were at
Yes.
Microsoft. Um, what a lot of people probably don't know is that Comet came out of a hackathon project that you and I and a few other friends of ours did together. Um, and what I've been working on lately is sort of, I would maybe call it the spiritual successor to Comet, or a fork of some of maybe the what Comet was before you turned it into Comet, back when we called it Hot UI.
Yep.
Um,
What a terrible name.
if you remember that name.
Oh, yes.
But so what I've been working on is sort of an MVU, or declarative UI framework for C Sharp. Very much in the spirit of Flutter or Swift UI. And as I was prepping for this, trying to think back on my career, this is the fourth time I've tried to build a declarative UI framework. The first time back in, I don't know, 2002, 2003, in Java, targeting AWT and Java Swing, and then made another pass at it, I think in 2012 or so, when I was working on TouchDraw for Android. And it was a prototype, but didn't really go anywhere. Then we did Comet Hot UI, and so this is sort of my fourth attempt at it. I would say also my most successful attempt at it.
Well, kind of makes sense. As you progress on, you get better. So
Yeah.
yeah, let's jump over. Do you want to switch over? We'll switch to your screen and we can start looking at it. This is the fun part.
Yes.
All right.
All right. See my screen?
I can see it.
All right. So before we jump into any examples, I thought it would just be better to actually show an example running. So I've got two different screens here. You'll see, it says examples on the left and examples on the right.
Yep.
The one on the left is running in Blazor, so that's Blazor server, and the one on the right is I still want to call it Xamarin iOS. It is a Net 8 iOS, so native iOS
Okay.
application. So let's see. So if we would go, if I scroll through here, let's pick the let's go down a little bit further. Stateful example. Let's do stateful example 2. The most basic one. Increment.
That was the very first sample we built back when we were
I think that was the very first one we built in
Comet. All right.
Comet.
So let's just take a step back really quick and try and update some people on what this is we're looking at, right? So the whole idea behind the declarative UI is it's a way that you're not using a different language between your code and your UI, and you're building things in code, right? So we don't have two different languages that we're working with, or two different files even when you're working with your UI. It's a way to, do you want to zoom that in, because that is really, really small.
Yeah. Oh, I have well, I will have to turn that on, because I have zooming turned off because I hit it so often.
Does Command plus work just to zoom in? Oh,
No,
that's
because
the one you hit.
Yeah, I actually have it disabled completely.
That's hilarious. Okay.
Let's see.
All right. So the idea is, though, you get to like mix and match your view model. It ditches with MVVM. You have your code, your view, and your view model, and normally you do a binding, indirect type of binding, to where it's normally not even type safe, but they know about each other ish, and it's loosely coupled. Whereas doing this declarative style UI, it's one file. It's tightly coupled. It just works. You ditch the ideas of binding and things just kind of update, which is really awesome. So yeah, you can show us through what we got here.
Yeah, and I would say that the one difference between what we did in Comet and what we did in what I'm doing here in what I call mix and match, is that in Comet, you could almost do binding at any any control in the view hierarchy,
Mhm.
and it was looking and monitoring for changes, and so only it would update. If you compare it to like Flutter and Swift UI, they're more of a, you update the state and you say update, and then it goes and rebuilds the whole or updates the whole view hierarchy all at once, and that's what this is doing as well. So in this example, our sort of sample increment counter, we're building our view, and we got a V stack, it's got a spacer, we got labeled the text field, and the text field is just presenting the value of state. It's basically a view that has a state, and so in this case, the state is an integer. And when I call increment count, it's incrementing the state, and really what's happening is it's incrementing the state and then notifying, saying, okay, the state has updated, at which point the whole view is reevaluated. The framework then does a diff on the tree and then renders only the the changes to the tree.
Okay, that makes sense. So that was actually gonna be my next question because I didn't notice the typing at first there. I was like, "Wait a minute, I see that build overrides and passes in an integer. How does that work?" So, okay, that makes
Yeah,
sense.
yeah, yes. So like in a in a typical, like a different type of an example, a lot of times what the state may be is like your view model. So when I'm building more complex apps with this, I sort of have a view and then a view model that associates to that view. However, unlike when you're doing Xamarin Forms or Maui development, where individual properties may be sending property notified change events. In this case, there's essentially one event on the whole view model, which is I've been updated. And so part of when you're developing for this is trying to decide when is a good time to go update the world.
No, that looks great. That's really interesting. So I'm just actually curious, did you stick with objects? Did you end up dropping it down to structs, or what are we doing for the well, obviously you're doing inheritance, so you stuck with objects. What type of objects do we pass in for the state? It really doesn't matter, I guess, at that point.
It
It's just
doesn't
type T.
it doesn't matter. So it works with structs, and so this is since I started doing this, this is the first time where I've really found a good use for the C# record types,
Mm.
because you can create a new record where you're only mutating one of the one of the values, one of the properties in it, and then it'll return you a new one. And so it works really, really well for that. However, I don't 98% of the time, what I'm passing around is an actual class, which is a a view model class.
So I know one of the things that we did in Comet, and one of the reasons I didn't go with this state originally was due to garbage collection and generating a bunch of objects. How has that been for you in this library?
So it has not been an issue thus far. So again, part of what to what I alluded to earlier, um, part of what you need to think about when you're sort of switched to this paradigm is um, designing your app so you're thinking about what part of the view hierarchy is going to be invalidated. As an example, I will jump to my last, what was going to be my last demo. Um, Go ahead and reload this. Here is an actual app that I've been building with it. That as I mentioned earlier, as a side business, I have a Vector 2D drawing application, and out of that Vector 2D drawing application, I've sort of built a cottage group of customers that have asked me to build custom field service data collection applications. So think about home appraisal or pest control companies or construction companies, companies that make kitchen countertops, and they all essentially have one thing in common: are they're going out to a some type of job site. They are filling out a questionnaire, answering some questions about the location. They may or may not be sketching something, and then they also want to generate some type of report coming out of that. And so I've built enough of those apps over the years that I decided, well, what would happen if I just went and built a generic app that could be sort of the new low code no code, where you configure your questionnaire, you configure whether or not you want to sketch something, and you design your reports, and it can be a little bit more automated. And so this app that you see here has been built with that. And so, as I built this app, part of what I'm trying to do is, let's click into something that's, even, dig down into this. Um, is trying to decide, okay, what are my view models in here? And when I click on something, what am I invalidating? So the one thing that you can do, in mix and match is, okay, when I am invalidating a view model or a view, it's only going to rebuild the part of the view hierarchy that you're actually impacting. And so for right now, if I'm clicking here on my tree view here on the left, um, everything up here, nothing is changing, and it's only rebuilding parts of the view. And so to your original question about trying to avoid lots and lots of object allocation, you kind of control that through the way that you build your application. And so you're trying to send your state change notifications only to the parts of the UI that are applicable to the change, so that you're not rebuilding the world and rebuilding thousands of objects every time you make an update. However, in practice, even if I would rebuild the world, I found it to be pretty performance, and because it's almost like those objects are such short-lived. Like the .NET runtime does a great job of keeping up, and they never go into long-term storage, and they're handled really well, and performance doesn't seem to suffer so far. I cannot hear you, Clancy. I'm getting your audio though.
All right, is that working? Okay, that's working. We're going to, all right, audio is fixed. I think NVIDIA Broadcast crashed on me. I had to go switch inputs. So sorry about that, everyone. That was not fun. All right. So anything specific you'd like to show us in this area, or do you want to jump into kind of like the tips and tricks and like how you build with your tools? Like what are some of your tips to be super productive as a developer, and especially while building frameworks or building these? How do you decide like what time to spend on building a framework versus just building something existing to build an app? Because this looks amazing and it's awesome, but it's a
Yeah,
lot of work to build a framework.
yeah, and to that point, one of the things that you start building a framework, and it's one thing to go and show, get one control, and then it's another thing to then make it to be, in this case, what's it look like when it's enabled, when it's disabled. Then it's how do I style it, or how do I handle layout consistently behind all the platforms. I would say, luckily, I like building developer tools and building frameworks, so I get probably as much joy from doing that as from actually building the end product. But yeah, it's sort of a delicate balance, and I actually have reminders set in my calendar every morning to tell me, work on the app, not the framework. And but every once in a while, you kind of go and have to go scratch that itch, and I shared this with you a few weeks ago when I did it. one of the itches I sort of had to scratch is within that app that I was building, I needed a calendar control. Um, and so it was a great way to go and sort of flex the capabilities of the framework to say, okay, can I go and build a custom control that is going to work both in web and Blazor, as you see here right now, or within iOS or Mac or WinUI or wherever else that I wanted to run it.
No, that
And
is beautiful. I have not built a calendar since
yeah,
Mono Touch days and have not had the desire to do it since. So,
yeah. So yeah, this was a nice little side project. However, that does rat hole into other things, where, for example, I had always supported using SVG as sort of my rendering for graphics within on the Blazor side, but that really got me wondering about what would happen, what would the performance be if I used Canvas instead of SVG, and so then I'm like, well, I need to have some way to benchmark this, so then I ended up building a little harness with animation in it so that I can kind of benchmark between what's it look like between SVG and Canvas. What's the impact on performance if I start increasing the number of objects that are being rendered. And so again, it's one of those things, you're building your own framework, so it's very easy to kind of go off on a tangent and not work on the sort of the core product. However, it's in my mind, sort of this work and doing these things is kind of proving to me that the framework is getting stable enough that I can actually depend on it, and actually release the app that's built with it. So that's been really good.
so you're doing all this in Blazor server. Have you tried doing the Blazor client portion yet? Or,
Yeah, so if we go to
of course
here,
you have.
yeah, so here's that, let's reload it. Here's that same
Wow.
thing, except for now, because we're running in WebAssembly, we have an additional option here. We can go and run it in
Skia.
Skia.
It looks a lot smoother actually in WebAssembly, which kind of makes sense.
Well, it's funny. Canvas probably performs the best. I was surprised to see that the SVG render actually performs much better in Blazor server, and I'm wondering if it's the way that I actually build the SVG. I'm using the the normal XML document model, and I'm wondering if that's generating too much either garbage collection or too much on the object model. And so I think I'm going to go and next write just a pure string writer implementation of the SVG renderer.
So it's
to see.
skipping a little bit on my screen. Is it happening on yours, or is that just the streaming?
That's just a stream. It's
Oh,
just
okay.
completely smooth. Yeah,
Okay.
and you can kind of see you can watch the frames per second up there. If it's pegged at around 60 frames per second,
Yeah,
then
it's
that's
solid.
actually smooth. Yeah.
I just wanted to call that out for anyone viewing that is, I figured it was smooth, not as jumpy as it was just showing over. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's awesome.
Yeah. The trick that I found with this is a pretty simple application. If I would go and I have a version of this application here, running in Blazor WebAssembly. To build this, I'm referencing around 75 .NET projects to go and build. Yeah, yes. Because everything's sort of modularized between my code bases. So it's much of it depends on this graphics is the stuff that's actually used in TouchDraw. And so by the time it goes and tries to link everything and do like AOT compilation, it takes around 45 minutes to build. And so I tend to do my development in Blazor server and only go down to WebAssembly as a sort of a final deploy stage.
Wow. Okay, so work in Blazor server as much as possible. That's definitely a little hack.
And it's also easier to debug in Blazor server. Having to use Chrome to debug with, and I'm typically in Safari, so uh, I find the development experience better in Blazor Server.
So how do you handle dependencies with 75 projects? Now, is that mainly just because you're working on the framework and you like to have the framework referenced, or is this what's going on with that? Wow.
I guess one way to describe also how I deploy and how I do development is I've sort of flip-flopped on this over the years, but I'm currently in the phase of my development life where I'm using a monorepo. So all of the code for all of the applications that I work on, either TouchDraw or this or the apps that I build for customers, are all within one repo. The nice thing about that is then I can go in and pull in a reference to a project on any of the solutions I'm working on, and it's there in builds, and I can quickly refactor or change something if I need to. Like I said, I've actually flip-flopped a few times, and there was a time when I had everything in its own repo, everything was its own NuGet package, and I found that I was developing slower, and so I've kind of gone back to a monorepo, and I've been much happier since I've gone back to that.
Interesting. I don't quite do the monorepo. I tend to just check all of mine out next to each other.
Yeah.
So my build script is cd dot dot check out 5 things, and then it can compile. So that's like the first step is, yeah, I hate the way that Git works with its submodules. I wish submodules were nicer, but I still have most of my stuff broken out into different projects. But yeah, first step is clone the 5 to 10 additional repos I need.
Yeah.
So they're
Yeah, I
referenced and
do.
like.
I do use I use submodules in sort of two cases. So, for example, mix and match is brought into this project through a submodule. And the two cases that I use submodules are either when I'm going to pull in an open source dependency, or when my plan is to open source something. So, the long-term goal would be to open source this UI framework. So I purposely do it as a submodule. It's in its own repository. The other weird thing about my development process is my monorepo is in Azure DevOps. So I was there for the longest time, whereas mix and match is off in GitHub. So I am sort of going back and forth between Azure DevOps, Git, and GitHub for my source code control.
That's really interesting. Is there a reason you haven't migrated one way or the other?
Mainly because it's less to do with Git. I mean, I could move the repos in 20 minutes. It's because I've got all my build scripts built with Azure DevOps pipelines. They work. They've been rock solid, and I just don't see any reason to spend the development time to go and rewrite them as GitHub Actions workflows.
Yeah.
And so if I'm going to do something brand new, sure, I go and write it in Actions and do it from there. But for legacy stuff, and even for some mobile stuff, I still find it's easier to do some of the mobile workflows in Azure DevOps just because the tasks that are available to you, at least the last time I tried it, were there was more for you from a mobile developer on the Azure DevOps side than what the community was providing on the GitHub Action side.
Interesting. Yeah, I've never used any of the stuff. I just have my own build scripts. Build.sh. So super advanced like that. So what tools do you use to try and help manage all this? I see you're working mainly in Writer. Any other tools or things
Yeah,
that you do to help
yeah.
improve your workflow?
So my choice of tooling is I try to pick tools that is going to be consistent between Mac and Windows. So I do 95% of my development on a Mac. However, because I have a Windows version of TouchDraw, I do need to do some development on Windows, and so I want tools that are going to work everywhere. So, from a IDE perspective, I do most of my development in Writer. I always have VS Code open. However, I use VS Code only as a text editor. It's and sort of a quick searching tool. For example, if I have a solution open that's only referencing like 3 or 4 projects in my monorepo, but I want to quickly find and search something, I'll use VS Code to go search through my monorepo and find the code that I'm looking for, the code snippet. The other tool I use a lot is Tower, which is a Git client. I know that I was in the Azure DevOps team at Microsoft and at GitHub. I still can't use the Git command line tools, and so I need a GUI to do it. And Tower's, in my opinion, a great Git client that's available both on Mac and Windows. So I get a consistent experience between both of them. And then the other thing I find kind of handy, and I don't think I could live without it right now, is I use Pastebot on the Mac, which keeps my clipboard history so that I can just copy something to the clipboard and I can quickly get back to it later in my dev sessions. So
one of
that one's
those fancy things that's on Windows just by default, if you
exactly,
enable it. If you enable it.
Yeah.
Okay. Question with Rider and stuff. Does Rider have they added the Copilot support, didn't they, recently?
Yeah.
Do you use any of those type of tools? What AI tools do you use?
Yeah, so I do use Copilot. I will say I started out as a sort of a Copilot skeptic because when I first started using it, it seemed like it was generating, and this was when it was in early beta. I felt like what it was generating was going to have to be correct enough. It was like I could write it faster myself. However, it's definitely evolved. And yeah, I have Copilot enabled, I'd say 95% of the time. There's some times where, within Writer that Copilot can interfere with the completions within Writer, and I want the Writer completion. So, I'll come down here at the bottom and, disable Copilot, do some development. However, what's really sort of impressed me with Copilot, especially, building my own UI framework, is that Copilot, will look at your code base and it can build, views now in mix and match for me a lot of time. And it's amazing how often it just sort of predicts exactly what I want. And it's kind of like it's 70% of the time it's going to give me exactly what I want, and 30% of the time it's going to spit out garbage. And it's like, no, I don't want that. But it's definitely on the, it's worth it to use it. It's one of those tools now that I actually pay for because I think it's actually worth using, and it makes me faster. As long as you're diligent and actually verify what it's generating. The other AI tool that I use is I use just Bing Chat to go off and do image generation for like little, say I need a little image or something for like an error page or 404 not found, or I want something whimsical. I do image generation with that. So.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I've had really good luck with Copilot. During all the days of working on Comet, I was always amazed when it would start auto completing for Comet. I'm like, I know it's not because it was trained on Comet repos, because this is it. So super exciting seeing how well those things are working. A lot of my side dev lately has been in Godot, and Godot is cool because the editor and the game engine are the same, but I don't like that I don't get Copilot for it, which is kind of sad because they don't really have an autocomplete extensibility built right into Godot editor, which hopefully someone will add at some point. And the VS Code support is good, but a little wonky. So I have not been using that as well as I would like. But yeah, it's nice when you're learning a new language, especially to have Copilot, because switching to Godot script it's different. It's really different using a different language. So I mess up a lot. And so it's nice having those extra autocompletes. All right. So with all this type of thing, and you running your own projects and running your own business and trying to keep this whole work-life balance, how do you manage all of it? What are some tips or tricks that you have to help manage life
So having come from GitHub and having been there, I do use GitHub projects quite a bit to keep track of my issues and my to-do list and my thoughts. So you can take the person out of GitHub, but I don't know if you can take GitHub out of the person. And so I still sort of adopt, even though right now I'm a one-person development team. In many of the ways, I'm still doing some of the same things that I would do when I was managing engineering teams at GitHub and Microsoft. So I do individual development like an enterprise, and so I try to use the tools to that are available to us to keep track of things and not forget what I was working on.
And you mentioned you use like timers or things like that. How do you try and what's a typical day like? Like how do you try and balance between mixing between all these things?
Yeah, so a typical day for me is one, I wake up and check support requests for TouchDraw and do any answer any emails. If there are any issues that I need to resolve, I do sort of prioritize TouchDraw development above anything else, since that's sort of the generating the income. Then I try to focus on the Survey app, and then only go off and do framework development, when I really need to. And so, um, I would, and I would say at this point, with the exception of the last week where I've been doing quite a bit of framework development is really less than 5% of my day. And when it is, it's typically more of a I've pushed, I'm trying to build something where, if I was doing the layout on this on iOS or Mac or whatever on Windows, it works just fine. However, when you're in Blazor and it's, nested divs and inside of divs inside of divs, it doesn't quite work. It's like I jump back to doing framework development to typically go and solve a web layout problem, which
Layout.
aren't,
It's
yeah,
always
layout.
layout and it's
It's
always
always
layout.
it's always layout. I can remember when we were building Comet or Hot UI, we felt like all we ever did was work on
Yeah.
layout.
Well, it was the same thing. Even doing Maui, we spent so layout. It's always layout. All the bugs, it's always layout. Layout
Yeah.
engines are the devil. I'd be happy if I never write another layout engine again, but I don't see that. Even with me working on my game engines in Godot, I was like, oh, I might start writing a layout engine. And yeah, there's decent layouts in there, but I still am like, oh, I'm probably gonna end up doing this. I was actually talking about when we were setting up the OBS stream. I'm like, I should write a layout thing for OBS. I'm like, no, no.
Yeah, but so you asked, first, what was my normal day? I also sort of have a normal week in that I still do some mentoring and some advising for some of my, ex-employees that work for me at Xamarin, Microsoft, and GitHub. So, even though I'm not necessarily, at a day job right now, I do still have some weekly one-on-ones with, some of my ex-colleagues or, ex-reports. So, that's all. It's nice to have sort of, to me at least, a break in my week that is not focused on code and on sort of more focused on the human side of things as well. And so, and stay in touch and, you know, mentoring and trying to give back a little bit as well.
Oh, that's exciting because it's got to get lonely just only working with yourself. It's
Yeah,
always more fun when there's someone else helping on the projects. So
exactly.
yeah, that's good. All right. So, what is the overall goals with Mix and Match? Because this is a really cool framework. It's awesome. Um, I mean, it's really impressive what all you've done over the past year.
Yeah, I don't know what the end goal is. For me, it's one. It's I mean the immediate goal is to allow me to try to ship an app. And part of the reason that I did this in the first place is that I had and this was about a year and a half ago. I had a Xamarin Forms app that I tried to migrate to Maui at the time, and I ran into issues, and I needed to decide what I was going to do as sort of long term for that. And so I built Mix and Match as sort of you know, could I build a framework myself and migrate that out to that, as opposed to either going and fixing, going contributing to Maui, or keeping it on Forms, or rewriting it in Flutter, or what everything else was, the possibilities were going to be. And I found that yes, I was able to build a framework. I was able to actually build and ship an app on top of it. And so, first and foremost, it's allowing me to do that. Long term, I'd like to open source it, but I also I don't want I say not that I don't want. I don't know, given where I'm at, if I can afford to go and support an open source project and still, do work on the apps that are going to hopefully drive revenue and drive a business. And so that's the main reason I have an open source, is because I'm afraid of supporting an open source project, and having that be my full-time job and not necessarily paying the bills.
No, that's always the thing with open source.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, interesting. Thoughts of monetization on a framework like this? Support packages, because then you could potentially do something where you're doing like a hybrid open
Yep.
source. It is what it is. If you want support, here's the payment form.
Yes. Certainly something I should think about, but not yet sort of on the top of mind yet to really explore for real. Because I still think, while I've been able to use it, there are quite a few things missing to make it ready to put in the hands of somebody else, such as documentation, which is actually why one of these tabs, I've started to build an editor um, to go and help me do documentation, because I've always done all my documentation for TouchStraw using Markdown that eventually gets published either as PDF files or using Jekyll to a website. But trying to manage sort of all the metadata so that you get your table of contents all nice and neat is also its own problem. Making sure that all your images are referenced, or say you want to delete a page, trying to go and find what are my incoming links. It's not working right now, but incoming or outgoing links to a page. And so I've started building an editor for documentation so that I can actually write documentation for Mix and Match.
Yeah, there's some AI tools out there that can help with this as well. So maybe you could just run through AI and be like, "Hey, we've got docs."
Exactly.
And AI never messes up, so the docs will be perfect.
They'll be perfect. You're right. Have you
Yeah.
seen there's that one story going around about it's on one of the sites about somebody bought a cookbook that seemed to be AI generated, and it just makes no sense.
Oh, there's been some good ones. I haven't seen the cookbook one, but I remember, what was it, like a month ago when they did that with the Willy Wonka experience that was all AI generated, but it was in real life, and they had actors reading AI generated scripts and yeah,
Yeah.
scaring kids, fun stuff like that. So yeah, no, it's interesting. AI is great as long as it's used with a discerning eye
Right.
and not just like, oh, AI did it. It's good to go. So it's been fun. It's been a fun, interesting journey with AI and how it's been changing our industry.
Yes.
So along that line, if you're off doing your own thing, how much time do you get to spend on like personal growth and like learning new technologies and keeping up with all these new tools? Um,
Um, not not as much as I like. Um, I mean, I could certainly go and do that, but then I think I spend all of my time doing that. I would say the one thing, at least for me, from a learning perspective, is the way that I learn best is by doing. And so I really need a problem solve to go and do it. For example, I wanted to do work on some AI stuff for image manipulation, and so applicable to this application, one of the things that I was playing around with was could I go and build something to do blurring of
license
license.
plates, yeah.
I mean, yes, I know there are services that go out there, and that's a solved problem. But for me, it was a way to, go and try to learn how to do it myself, and try to learn the capabilities. So I'm trying to sprinkle it in judiciously, in a way that doesn't suck me into it, where that just, 3 weeks later, and that's what I've been working on.
Awesome. So yeah, there's already people in chat asking how can they follow your work because they're really interesting. So probably following you on Twitter or things like
Um,
that. It's best bet.
yeah, I really should start tweeting and or on Mastodon, posting more. I will say that when all of the third-party Twitter clients got banned from Twitter, I was a Tweetbot user. I would say I was not a Twitter user, I was a Tweetbot user, and so it's taken me a long time to kind of come back to Twitter. And so I need to start posting there again, and or to and to
somewhere.
math somewhere.
I'm
Yeah,
still trying to figure out where all the developers went because all you hear is
yeah,
people quitting. It's interesting. We're in a weird transitional phase right now, and it's
we
so
are.
hard starting over. It's so hard starting over on a new platform.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So hopefully, yeah, people are interested in this. There's definitely you're making a buzz. This mix and match is really interesting. It's really cool. Like the fact that you have this running in a website. Can we actually see your survey running on your iPad? You have it right there. Just curious.
I don't have it running.
Oh, it's
I
okay.
don't have it in this simulator.
That's
Yeah,
okay. It's
yeah,
okay. I was putting you on the spot.
yeah. But the thing was, this actually started as an iPad app, and it came over to the web. So for me, it's more impressive to see it running in Blazor because I've had TouchDraw and similar apps to this running in iOS for years. So seeing it over here is for me, the cool side.
Yeah, no, that is super impressive. I know you did the initial work to get Comet running on Blazor, but we never really kept up with that or worked on it. So it's really awesome
Right.
seeing how well it's working because that, yeah, you couldn't tell it. Yeah, it's awesome. It looks right. So that is really, really impressive. Yes, people are agreeing. It looks awesome. So I'm really, really impressed with that. All right. So going forward with this, what's some advice that you could give people trying to get into to working in tech or working as developers or working on cool frameworks like this? Or how do people get started on stuff like this? Or what advice
Um,
would you give them?
my advice would be don't worry about that technology. Find something that scratches your itch and go and try to build it. Um, it doesn't matter. Yeah, yes, I prefer .NET these days. But I've done lots of Java development. I've done lots of C, C++, Objective C. I've done all the languages. It's less about the language and more about just actually doing it. And I think there's nothing wrong with learning along the way. I mean, I think you and I would both agree that we make plenty of mistakes. Even though we've been doing this for 20 plus years, even we make stupid mistakes all the time, and it's just about sort of getting started on it. Have a goal in mind and iterating on it until you actually get it done.
Awesome. Yeah, this is really impressive. It's amazing you've done this in, yeah, less than a year now, I'm guessing, right? Something like that. Or has it been,
Yeah.
or is it getting close to a year? I don't know.
Well, it's it's been about a year, but I essentially didn't work on it for 6 months. I had some family things going on, and so during last spring and during the summer, I was focused on the family, and so I didn't really do any development. In fact, if you would go look at my GitHub profile, you can see my commits. You can see that there was sort of a lull, and then things picked back up. So this is probably 4 to 5 months of development time um, over a year.
No, that's really exciting. So hopefully in the sometime near future, it sounds like people would love to get their hands and touch on it at some point. If you can figure out a way to let others try it, that I think that'd
Yeah,
be super interesting. So documentation is the next big hurdle, it sounds like.
absolutely. Yeah, they've got to know where to start. Samples on thank you so far.
That's a full-time job, documentation. It really is.
Yeah,
AI, make AI do it. I
exactly.
think it's your best bet. All right. Well, we're towards the end of the show. Any final thoughts you'd like to give to anybody, or how do people follow along with you? Um, Twitter,
Yeah, yeah.
Mastodon.
Yeah,
What's your post at?
Twitter and Mastodon. I'm on both of them, so you can find me there. I will try to be a little bit more now that the sort of the cat's out of the bag that I have this. I'll try to be maybe share a little bit more about what I'm doing and the progress. And don't be shy about pinging me. If you have any questions or want to ask me something. I like engaging with the community and am happy to talk to with anybody.
Awesome. Well, thanks a lot again for joining me, John. This was really fun looking at such an awesome project, and it feels good seeing that all the work we didn't just go away because we put a lot of time and effort into Comet. So it's nice seeing something come from that labor of love we had there.
Yes, and I think it proves that the idea that we had is viable. That's that's the thing. I'm not sure I can ever go back to XAML again. Sort of this declarative code first UI approach is for me sort of all I want to do unless I'm doing really low low level stuff where it's like I need to be working at the the native framework level.
Yeah, how often do you drop down to native now that you're got your own little framework there? Is most of that, do you have very many custom renderers per se, or is almost all of it done in?
No, no, the interesting thing for example, I go if we go to this
Hmm.
this example here, um, I before last week or before early this week, I didn't even have a tree view control, and so I built this tree view control all with the inside of mix and match. It's completely virtual, whatever. However, I went and ran this on Mac OS, and the tree view looked fine, but it wasn't native. And so in that case, okay, yeah, Mac OS has a native tree view controller as NS outline view. So I went and did the implementation. But the cool thing is you can go and build a lot of custom views that may natively exist, and sometimes the custom one has something that you don't get in the native one that you're happy enough with. But it's nice to know if you want to, you can quickly go and implement a native render and get the native control.
Well, there's also the continued, or what's the right word for that? But like you mentioned, like going between Windows and Mac and things like that, and it's nice for things to feel consistent between those platforms as well. So there is that. If you're having your users bounce between the web or whatever, if it looks and feels the same, it's going to be, yeah, intuitive to them. So,
Yeah, well, and the other thing about this is I've always been more of a native developer. So I have always preferred like my Mac apps are built on Cocoa. My iOS apps use UIKit. My Windows apps use WPF or have used WinForms or UWP depending on what I've done in the past. However, doing this now where I can sort of build a what I think is a pretty high fidelity app in a development paradigm that I'm comfortable with, I'm almost to the point where maybe sort of you know the Electron Slack type apps aren't so bad. And so one of the next things I want to do is sort of build sort of like the Maui Blazor native and just go and wrap this in a in a web view on each native platform, because for some of the apps I built, that'd be more than enough. I don't really doesn't care if they're truly native, because this would be good enough and I can get the look and feel and the fidelity and the experience that I want.
oh, interesting. I'm excited to see how that experiment works. So, awesome. Well, again, thanks a lot for your time, John. I really appreciate it. I know everyone's really excited to see this framework, so you might be getting some requests for you to open source it from people aside from just me. But yeah, thanks again, and I look forward to talking to you again. Always fun to
Yeah,
catch up.
yeah. Thanks for letting me be first. I appreciate it.
No, no, thank you for doing it first. Who knew how this would go? But thanks,
Exactly.
everyone. All right, talk to you guys later. Bye.
All right. Cheers.